3 is not enough. We need to assess against 7. But also that peer assessment. It was quite interesting that the peer assessment was 2 students randomly chosen to do the peer assessment, and anonymous as well, so you didn't know who was your peer was assessing you, which I think is quite interesting. So I think that's another interesting thing in that whole system. Okay, so now it's movie time. So I'm going to show a video now that is about 50 minutes long, so it's 45 minutes long, I think. So settle down, get your popcorn. Cynthia Hathaway is a very interesting designer. She's part of Droog Design, the famous Dutch group of designers. She worked at the Design Academy, she worked with me at the Fun Lab, and she's got a very clear approach to experiential design. Cynthia, the reason that I asked her to come and talk to us was because I think that we sometimes mix up collaboration and multidisciplinarity with interdisciplinarity. So interdisciplinarity is a whole new thing. It's very difficult because you're asking people, for instance, engineers to work with designers, and you need methods to be able to bring those people together. So collaboration works well, so you might have a filmmaker collaborating with a textile designer, and obviously the filmmaker uses their own expertise, the textile designer uses their own expertise, and they do something together. So what Cynthia's talking about here is a big 3-year project that she did, where she went to a science park that's kind of failing in Utrecht in the Netherlands, in Holland, and what she did with a group of artists to try and bring those people together. So this is quite out there, so you'll see that there's lots of things that she does which is very strange and very weird, but also quite interesting on how she develops things to bring everybody together. So I hope you don't think that it's a luxury to spend such a long time, but I think it's important to look at the difference between this multidisciplinary collaboration compared with the actual interdisciplinary, which is a big, huge thing.
Hello everybody, it's fantastic to be here. You live in paradise. I'm very jealous. And thanks for inviting me. I'm here to tell you a little bit about a 3-year project actually in Utrecht, bringing artists into a campus of scientists and setting up shop. And basically this new department on campus, it offers artists and scientists room where searching and not research is the focus. Gathering knowledge for the sake of having knowledge is no longer essential. What matters is that all knowledge is used to cope with complex problems and where various disciplines cooperate, for the challenges ahead are beyond specialist solutions. This calls for a different way of doing research, not just narrowing down to render research verifiable, but also asking the broader questions in the collective interest. The Department of Search looks for new ways of searching, and this new artist department took a first step by introducing the artist method at the Utrecht Science Park. And yes, for 3 years the department shows how the artist method and the scientific search method meet. So use this is the Utrecht Science Park. It's a master plan of Rem Koolhaas of 1999. It's to be completed in 2020. It's 300 hectares and there's 22,000 staff, 50,000 students, and 10,000 are on their way, and about 4,000 to 6,000 are living on campus. And it's focused on bringing business, industry, and academia together for healthier and safer, sustainable cities. So their themes are dynamics of youth, healthy urban living, and on this complex they have a research medical hospital, a Department of Law and Economics, a phenomenal cancer research center called the Lvmh. Nutristia is there, a veterinarian department, which of course I'm interested in because there's an incredible research farm there, and a botanical gardens. The thing is that the humanities, or the alpha studies, are based in the city, and of which there's very little collaboration. And this is what happens every day. At 4:15 on the dot, there's a traffic jam to get the hell out of there. And this is not a very good thing if you're trying to be a top world-class science park. They're having problems with sticking power. And this may be a lovely architectural setting, but as we all know, architects are not really about dealing with the after effects of living with their buildings. It does not express the interior spaces of collectivity, the commons. There's nowhere people can come together. It's a very commercialized space. So if you do want to come together, it's in cafes, it's in cafeterias, it's, just eating pizza. So indeed, we thought as artists we had to make a meeting space on this campus. Here's some of these moments of the campus. And I think as artists, we come in there and immediately are a little bit nervous of what artists are expected to do here, or are translated as people who make sculpture. Sort of alien urnships. Sorry, I'm being a little condescending, I'm sorry, but I was living there for 3 years, and it's very strange how what is brought in there as art has nothing to do with the context. It's just sort of, you actually don't even attach yourself to it. We have famous buildings. I say we because I feel like I'm a part of it now. But the in-between space is very dead. It's quite sterile. And they put benches out to look onto fields, but you are not allowed on the fields. It's a very, it's a design of looking onto nature rather than participating in it. It's a very designed space. So look, but don't touch. That's also a very Dutch expression, huh? And these buildings are really starting to wear down. And so there's a huge repair costs to keeping these beautiful buildings going. Well, one of our artists, Bureau d'Etudes, they're a French graphic design group. They're rather anarchist, I have to say, but that's good in a way, especially on this campus. They decided to map the campus, and they go into extreme detail. Bureau d'Etudes make these maps that you need a magnifying glass to look at all the details. And what they showed was that this campus is based on an American model called the triple helix model. And it is with the 3 zones in which they concentrate, which is market and industry, academic, and politics. But what's left out is the social, cultural, and the environment. It is not a major theme for them. And this seems insane in a campus that's dealing with sustainability. Why are you leaving these groups out? They're also physically out. They're in the center of the city. And this kind of information we put out there on our department. We have this huge billboard, and all this information is there so that people can say or look at it in order to express a bit, do you know where you are? What are all the agendas here? Who's actually involved in this place? And you should know about it, because what happens here can have huge consequences elsewhere. It's a very global place, the Utrecht Science Park. When we had this billboard up, we were always saying, well, we should have, all of these things, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all of them coming together. And this brilliant professor came by and said, no, you've got it all wrong. All of these things have to go into the environment for things to actually work. Mela and I use the action research cycle, we call it. Basically, we use prototypes or interventions. We design these interventions in context. Half of them are not finished, but they're on purpose so that we get feedback from the community. And then together, or not, depending on the community, we adjust those prototypes and keep going. So it's a constant cycle of feedback with the people in which we are situated. We always work in context. And what I'm going to try and get through today is 3 of our projects that show this sort of action research loop. We are artists that don't, let's say, create paintings or sculpture, which many artists also like us do, but in this context we don't. We use, again, these interventions, whether it be a classroom right inside the university that we take over a 5th floor of a building and bring artists in, to you'll see a giant cornfield. These are artworks, but they really are about creating conversation and a space to make that conversation happen. This is what's happening at the university. They put on a lot of events, cultural events. They want to bring us in because they think that we will warm up the place with a lot of imaginative activities. And I don't know, these sorts of things could be anywhere. Again, they don't reflect the actual campus. And we were trying to think, how can we bring all this incredible expertise out into the park? How do you bring the science of the park into the park? Because you don't see it. You should be able to live and breathe it. The whole campus should be a prototype. It should be somewhere where you walk through and you go, my God, this is what they're working on. People should be behaving in their research. It should be a very sort of personalized but tangible space of the best research that's going on when it comes to sustainability. But indeed, these sort of public events are slightly generic. So our first, let's say, intervention was Mela and I also were directors of a course called System D Academy at the Sandberg Institute. It was an interdisciplinary master's course for 2 years only. This is an interesting system that the Sandberg has now, where they grab a very interesting topic, let's say, and you can go in for 2 years and be researchers, and then you're gone. So it's a very fast sort of system. So we were looking at informal systems in Holland, which is an extremely formalized country. So students were asked to look into the history of System D. And we started to think, why don't we get to this very formalized campus and bring our students in and start meeting scientists. So we took over the 5th floor of a building right in the heart of the campus called the Lvmh building. And it was there that actually the students developed this concept, the Department of Search. And it looked, we just took over a floor, so it had the standard rooms and each student and researcher got their own room, and they titled themselves, and they went into the campus and they did research. And they met the scientists just by actually walking through doors. That's something we actually urge researchers to do, is actually don't ask for permission, just walk in. Universities are supposed to be open. And a lot of interesting thought was brought to the table by researchers. This is Dennis Espadina, that's making this very specialized campus. That the university is a dog. It's a thoroughbred. They are breeding thoroughbreds, and yet we all know what happens with thoroughbreds. They're quite weak without the mutt. And so he saw this as quite a system. You go in and out, and you're out in society, but you're almost a little bit weakened by being such a specialist in these times. We brought in our own staff. These are our sort of, what did we call them now? These are our honorary board members of the Department of Search, living and dead. And they're hobbyists. I'm a huge follower of hobbyists. I think these experts, amateurs, they're often called, are not looked at enough in professional areas such as academia. They're sort of the mavericks. John Hutchison, he's a maverick scientist because he's working on anti-gravity that is not considered, let's say, correct in the science spheres, because he works on ESP, and he blows up metal. It's incredible what happens. And he has to be in the room when the system is working, or else it doesn't seem to work. But he's incredible. I just love this person. And so he's poo-pooed because he cannot be, that's the problem. If the experiment can't stand on its own, that's no good for science. I mean, if he has to be in the room, then yeah, that's a bit problematic. I'm a big follower of giant vegetable growers. You guys are great at it, I have to say. You may not realize it, but you're top. But so are other people all over the world. This is Brad Worston. And he's my great pal, but he also is, the thing about hobbyists is that they're free experimenters. They love to break the rules. They use low tech. They are very, they're often so obsessed, and they don't, it's for a lifetime. So this is the sort of passion that I'm so interested in, and this incredible expertise that they're allowed to just throw on whatever they're working on. So I try and bring these experts with other experts. This is Pek van Andel. He's a professor of serendipity. He's quite a character, but famous in Holland. And he believes in this investigation of how you research. It's more pathfinding, serendipitous findings when you kind of are on a search rather than going from A to B. Or you become, on your search from A to B, you take all these different roads. And you might not get to B, but that's perfectly fine. Yes. This is also another person who's dogs that know when their owners are coming home, and other unexplained powers of animals. 7 experiments that could change the world, a do-it-yourself guide to revolutionary science. These kinds of people are often very questioned by the scientific establishment. So we just honor them. Because this campus is about life sciences, we brought in hobbyists that are also dealing with life sciences. So we have Sandra Smits, she's a bully dog breeder. We have Madame Sarah Dio, and she's a bodybuilder. And we have, of course, Brad Worston. And we put them together with scientists of the campus. and brought them into conversation. So Sandra was in conversation with Jan Wuthausen, who's with the veterinarian department on companion animals. We had Brad talk to Professor Corné Petersen. He's in the Department of Biology about plant-microbe interactions. And Dio, she was in discussion with Bastien Dupré, who is in cardiology and in stem cell research and muscle regeneration. And this was all done in the Department of Search. And there's Brad with Corné Petersen, and this is Bastien Dupré. And what's incredible when you make these meetings happen is that they, of course, are sharing actually a lot of the same expertise. Brad is just as concerned about root growth and development as Corné Petersen, who's trying to create rooting systems that can survive flooding in India, let's say. They use the same microbes. The thing that Brad does, because he's also so low-tech, he can also say, well, have you tried pancake syrup? You know, these kinds of interactions are so lovely. Bastien Dupré is a PhD researcher, and he's looking at circadian rhythms, and when you inject stem cell into patients, and that should we do this during the night or during the day? And this kind of thinking is being looked at, but he's a little bit on the edge. He's calling for a radical research center. And he sees the Department of Search as a space that he could align with other fellow researchers who are dying for a radical experimental lab, which he cannot have. It's not possible at the university. Well, here's Sandra talking to Rothausen in the veterinarian department. And what's interesting is these people we wanted to bring in because they're on the ground. They're at the end of the pipe. They're the ones that are dealing with the decisions and the research that informs policy and then trickles down to them. And they are, of course, it sometimes works and it sometimes doesn't. They have to struggle with a lot of changes. And someone like Sandra will say, you know, I work 24/7 with dogs in the real world in my farm. And, you know, things are very different than in the lab where you are researching and making decisions. And, you know, I'm very glad to meet you because we need to talk more. Well, students definitely were free or thought they were free to bring in animals for the first time into the UNIC building as part of just having an animal around. These were our birds of the System D Academy. They were transported to the UNIC building. And of course, students love this idea of making mistakes. Like, we've got to start making more mistakes to learn from our mistakes. This is one student who pitched a tent to sleep 24/7 in the UNIC building, to be obsessed by his research and investigations. Well, but as soon as we did these things, very quickly, the university said, what the hell are you doing? And they gave us a list of their rules. They just handed it out to us immediately. You know, incredible rules, but this is part of the intervention. You start to understand when you do an intervention what the context is like. So absolutely no animals unless it's a blind dog. Suspicious behavior, well, we certainly didn't think we were doing suspicious behavior, but I guess we were. There's no, anyway. So then students started to get quite rebellious. This is Clément Carré, and he went around talking to professors, and he's one of these people who just can't take no for an answer. And he was coming across some situations where a professor will say, well, I can't tell you anymore. This is like restricted information. And so he decided, okay, I'm going to kidnap a professor, and I'm going to set information free, because this is not the way a learning knowledge institute should be. Well, we had an opening, and well, this is another student who created a Institute of Post-Maritime and Theological Studies. Basically, it's a confession booth for professors so that they can say what they're not allowed to say. And he had all these fish hooks so that it would hook ideas, hangings, so you had to be careful because they were quite sharp. Another amazing thing was some students found 3 archives on campus of research papers that are not allowed out. And of course they went bonkers over this, and we thought this was highly interesting. So they made a room for lost research. And a map of where these archives, hidden archives are, and you can't get into them. They're sort of locked, and for, it's a question, why are the papers that don't make it, that don't get the peer review, that don't get the AOK, they have to be out. They have to be accessible. It's that whole idea of the mistake again. What is a mistake? These mistakes can change day to day into something that actually is not a mistake. So, all right, yes. So those archives probably are not, actually there's one down there too, so there's 4. Also, students went around to find who are the connectors of this community, who are the people who are pinning each other, pinning students and researchers and, well, just the community together. And it's people like the pizza man. He's there day in, day out. It's the Fox Cafe and Bar. It's people who are one-on-one, seeing students every single day. And she gave him a hero's cape. We're going to blow up. Okay. Well, Mela is an incredible illustrator, map maker. He mapped the campus and found out very quickly, well, we just did also by trying to walk into buildings or setting up shop there, that most of the campus is forbidden. It's private property. Only the yellow parts here is public space. And Mela and I are very much into making public space public. So these kinds of things are quite incredible when we come across this, that in a university or a campus, again, it's very restrictive, even in a physical way. These beautiful meadows, they have fences around them, and then they have a slope, which means then you definitely can't get onto them. So it's a very, you can be here, but you can't be here kind of situation. Okay, so from saying hello to scientists and saying, we are here, how do you do, what are you doing, starting to create some conversations, we decided that we would have to keep going and really continue to set up shop. And Mela and I decided, just to go back to that image, that we would use one of the many restricted plots of land to set up a place for community action and making this landscape productive. So we turned, of course, to the giant vegetable growers and thought, why don't we make a community vegetable field? And because this is a science campus, we're going to make a big competition. And we're going to grow the biggest corn plant on the planet. And this should bring all these disciplines together. Oh, that's me getting into, I'm the princess of the day. These are the giant vegetable growers that I'm part of the association. And, these kinds of people are, these things are explosively glorious. To bring a giant vegetable into a campus, I do it all the time. I use them as interventions. I bring them into art institutes, like not art, galleries. So like the Van Abbe Museum, I roll them in to create this tension between, oh my God, is it art or is it the real thing? And people get all mixed up. Security guards in let's say the Van Abbe say, don't touch, don't touch. It's a vegetable, for God's sake. So, you know, bringing in this fantasy and magic onto the campus, giant vegetables are a perfect way to do it. We used the corn, Mexican corn called challah. It can grow 10.5 meters high. So this is me, and well, there's 10 meters. The world record was 10.3 meters, and the corn cobs can be this big. And well, I mean, it's been going on for a long time. That's a corn going all the way up the barn, and well, these are American corn growers, and they do all these tricks to try and get them to. And it's low tech. You do not need anything per se. You just need pieces of wood and whatever's lying around. That's also the wonderful thing about hobbyists. And on a high-tech campus, this is so nice to bring in these low-tech and materiality. You know, you can just do it, throw something together, and it's okay. Another great thing is to realize when you go into these campuses, we learned, do not go in thinking you know anything, and ask for help. And in that engagement of asking, the campus opens up. So I don't know anything about growing giant corn. We don't even know how to make a cornfield. We don't even know how to put in a fence. So we immediately have to look in our sort of naivete for help, and we went to the research farm. And they were happy to help out. So we were starting to create a network immediately by this project. And the botanical gardens grew our seeds. And the plan was to get these up to a certain point, which was about 400 of them, to then distribute them around campus to create our network. So we did. We went through corporation doors, put a plant there, say come in a month to the field to plant your corn, and it's a competition. So, you know, in 3 months we're taking the corn to that hobby competition, and the hobbyists will measure. So in doing this, we started to create this sort of these I don't know, happy corn growers, and they were very diverse. So, you know, there were bus drivers, security guards, students, well, all sorts of people, and that was a way for us to get to know the campus as well. We also used interventions to get them distributed because in a lot of cases we started to find out that there's a lot of stress on the campus. In some cases we'd go up and a student would say, are you kidding me? I have no time. I'm not going to deal with this. Or somebody would say, I don't have enough sun coming into my office. I'll kill the plant. So we thought, this is saying something about the architecture. We'd go to biologists, say, here, oh, yeah, I don't know how to grow a plant. You know, I'm in a Petri dish. So, you know, we had to really sort of, this is a way just to learn how are people in relation to these community actions and also to their environment. Well, to catch people's attention also, it's a pretty hyper space, so these guys set up a corn martini bar in the elevator of a residence. So just you have a moment in time where people can't just rush off and say, no, I'm too busy. No, you're not. Here we are. Would you like a martini? And here's the plant. In, you know, the 20 seconds you have in an elevator. We raised a flag in front of the dean's office, and they were putting plants over some art pieces here. And immediately a security guard came out because he didn't want the corn plants on the art pieces. And we thought, my God, isn't that incredible? Because actually flying a flag is, first of all, it's quite rare in Holland. They're not big flag wavers. So these flagpoles were always empty. But he never looked up. He never saw the flag, which said something kind of odd, like, so we were all actually quite happy that it was okay, we'll just take the plants down, and actually the main goal to put the flag up there was, it went. We had to build our own bridge. Unfortunately, in these very big campuses, it's very hard to get people to take responsibility. So we just went ahead and did it. And about 150 people came with their plants to the cornfield, all sorts of people. We didn't know who necessarily. We also had a moment where we could distribute them in the canteen, and people would take them. And we thought, oh, isn't this going to be great? And they signed up, and we created a map. They had to sign up, and they had to show where they were studying on the campus. And this lovely cornfield happened. And some people were experimenting, so the biologists were doing all sorts of great sort of things to make theirs grow the highest. And this experimentation was so nice to see between all different departments that were competing against each other. So we knew we had to, the competition element was important. But, very soon after, within a month, that cornfield was left empty. We were the only ones to look after this cornfield. Well, I was the only one. I think it takes time to do these things, to get people to say, oh, what's going on over there? Oh, I have to invest some of my time in here. Aren't they going to do it for us? So it's an attitude that we've been there for 3 years now. I think it's going to be in the 5th year that people really start to understand and engage more and feel like, okay. But anyway, the campus, our corn was attacked by crows. And the campus hunter, there is one, because the landscape is such a monoculture, it's just to look at, that there are no predators for rabbits, let's say, and the rabbits, there are tons of them, and they get this terrible disease. And there's a campus hunter who shoots these rabbits at 4 in.the morning with a silent gun, because students would go bonkers. But he said, I have the solution, and he brought us crows, and dead crows, and hung them and the original scarecrow, it works. No more crows ever ate our corn crops. And there are so many crows, they're infesting everything on the campus. Well, there was a beautiful harvest of corn. We had the highest one. It went to the competition, and the experts measured, and it was 3.88 meters, the highest one, which was pretty high, but they gave us an award of encouragement. And it was grown by the head of the veterinarian department. We made the corn beer, first campus beer from the corn, brought in a hobby corn brewery to brew the first campus beer. I have to be careful. I brought the vegetables into the canteen. Can you tell me how much time I have? 7 minutes? Okay, I'm going to have to skip way ahead. Sorry, I think you get the gist of what's happening. I brought the giants into the canteen, a huge Sodexo canteen, and made soup for 2 days. And now what's wonderful is the hobbyists have set up shop annually to do their competition at the Botanic Gardens, which is wonderful. I have to move on, sorry. The campus has some incredible resources. This is what you're seeing here, incredible milk, biological milk. that's all sent out and put into the main stream of milk, of the milk industry in Holland. And for a campus dealing with sustainability, it was about, for us, keeping the resources in. So I was dealing with the milk, because it's 6,100 liters a week of organic milk, and it all goes out. Had students starting to take interest in the farm, drinking milk. Yes, zero footprint campus. This was the third intervention. We learned from the cornfield that we were too out there. We were not in view of enough people, that people indeed sort of handed us over the plants. They didn't necessarily feel an affinity, and we learned we have to find a shared value. And we readjusted and decided as artists we have to share a theme. And if this campus is all about sustainability, we're going to work with that. It's very important. And then the doors open. It becomes more of a cooperative situation. And so we took on the theme Zero Footprint Campus. That's not their theme, but they do want to be energy efficient by 2020. So we also teased it a bit to say, well, zero footprints, it's impossible. But let's try anyway. And okay. And in order to do this, we thought the Department of Search has to come right into the middle of the campus. We have to be visible. We need to make the space. And so we set up in a very empty area. There are a lot of them on the campus. And created this next manifestation of the Department of Search. And we brought in 12 artists who worked on different themes to do with sustainability. We had a barn raising of the Department of Search, all about a community effort, so everybody was involved of the campus to make our department, from old building technique up in Friesland. Well, that's the Department of Search, and the rest scattered. So it was important that we also scattered and went into departments. We had an open celebration to have the three main stakeholders who were funding us unveil the Geneva Pline, which basically normally it's just called a street, but we made it a pline. So that's the Geneva Pline. And we had an open air university where lectures were happening, debates, anyone could come, share, talk, whatnot. And we had also of the artists, the 12 artists, their prototypes on this space so that people could come and be engaged. But this was after working out these prototypes with scientists as well. And from doing this, we built a massive network. These are the artists and then all the people that they worked on, and a diverse group of people within each artist's cell to work on very different issues. This is Arne Hendricks. This is how can we deal with our obsession with growth. And we have to start looking at degrowth. So he matched his own ideas about the incredible shrinking man to cancer cell researchers who are also about degrowth and also the Department of Economics. What's our relationship to nature in the science park? Laurent Tixidor, he made an let's say an outdoor platformed area in a little chunk of forest by the highway for anybody to come and sit in the forest and contemplate, just find a quiet space. And also biologists were using this, and that you could put your tent there for 24/7. This is absolutely not allowed, but okay, we did it anyway. And a beautiful design. The tree grows into the structure for support as it grows over time. So there's nothing going into the tree goes into the structure. Very, very beautiful, well thought out design. All of this had to go after we left. It's unfortunate, but because of rules and regulations, all of this had to be wiped out except for these two platforms, because you might fall off this and die. No, you know, we can't take on risk anymore. You know, and we're all about, come on. This is a defunct stair tower. It was built in the 50s, never used, because the light of the city is blocking out the instruments, and also the buildings that were built are blocking the instruments. And this is one of the first, let's say, what we did was look at the stars, look out there, ask questions, who are we? And create a relationship with the stars. And here was this defunct star tower. It's very ironic, to be honest. Well, okay. So Martin van der Ende made, and he revitalized it. It's been closed for 40 years. And he opened it up, and he made it a meeting space for scientists to come. And he went around to about 50 scientists and said, what is your most interesting and invention that will be here for the next 100 years, or has the most impact of all these incredible things on the campus in terms of a personal, yes, idea? Well, there are many more. I'm really sorry to cut it short. Well, I just have to show this quickly. Bureau d'Etudes, that sort of anarchist group, they had training sessions on how to be a protester on campus, and created marches to do with the environment, and to get, you're not allowed to put a political poster on the wall in the campus. It's not allowed. Or religious, anything. It has to be just about research. So this idea of not being able to have debates or political debates, or start talking to each other. Yes, okay. I'm sorry. I've gone way over time. There's so much to see. And I'll leave it at this one. This is a feminist group called Read In, who went into the library and found out, why is this search engine so male, so Eurocentric, and so white? And these are the ways, this is the scientific community is using this search engine, and this is impossible, absolutely impossible. So they made a new library search engine. I think that's it.
Yeah, you're probably right, this is cross-disciplinary. So how are you bringing these people together? Again, it's a question for 2030, in that this science park in Utrecht is very interesting. You know, a Millennium Project, 1998, Rem Koolhaas, for those that know, amazing architect, and it just doesn't work. 50,000 students, you know, all these professors, but the environment, something's missing. So how do you do things to try and challenge people and bring this network of people together so that collaboration can happen? Okay, so I hope that was useful.
I also like one more thing. The fact she spoke about aversion to risk taking.
Yes.
You know, how in a whole system of needing to get there, even as evaluators or maybe as educationists, we've lost sight of encouraging people who think out of, out of the boundary. And it doesn't need to work every time. It would fail, but the important thing is you tried.
Yes, and I think that's what I thought her beginning thing about, it's not research but it's search, and actually, you know, this kind of constant building up of knowledge might not be as important as exactly what you say, try some things out. I thought the active research was a very nice model. You just do things, they might be unfinished, prototypes, try them out with people, get feedback, iteratively move it on, is a very nice. We know that some of the most successful research, actually the research is done before they even publish it, or before they get funding for it. So this seems to be a lot more experimental. Of course it's social, and of course it's romantic. But the fact that the science park hadn't brought the arts and humanities to the science park, and they were somewhere else, and kept bringing these, you know, marathon running thing going on, or cheerleaders, or it's just kind of bringing in culture when you need culture to be embedded, don't you? Yeah, so I thought that was a very interesting thing. What I want to do now is show a quick video of Professor Chris Archer-Brown. Professor Chris Archer-Brown is our director of our business school, and he's going to talk a little bit about what his approach is for open innovation, which I think this is just a 10-minute video, so...
I didn't realise how hot it was this side, because I've been over there. Nice to talk to you again. To remind you, and for those who didn't hear me yesterday, I'm Chris Archer-Brown. I'm Professor of Digital Entrepreneurship. My teaching is aligned with the business school. So I am quite frightened, particularly as I'm going to talk about some tech stuff, that you're going to throw things at me, so please don't do that. Okay, the conversation this morning was about the difference with tech and human experiences. Thank you very much. And for me, this is the archetype of the difference between the two. So for those who can't see sitting in the back, this is a version 1 iPod, actually a version 2 iPod, if I'm honest. And this, in case you're wondering why I would be talking about this in the relation of open innovation, is simply that this was the last to market, essentially. There were about 50 of these types of players on the market when Apple brought theirs into play. But the difference that Apple had was a vision of a simple communication, a simple human experience of connecting with music that has become the basis of not only their iPhone and digital artifact experience, but pretty much the same as everyone else's as well. So the key point, I've got a number of takeouts that I wanted to highlight from the paper that I've worked on and submitted, which is that these human experiences, whilst we all as consumers want them to be as simple as possible, are actually really, really complex. So this is from somewhere on the Apple website, which talks about editing a photo on your iPad and then being able to finish the job off on your iMac or whatever. But the underpinning technology stack that makes that work is very, very complex. And even organizations like as large and powerful as Apple can't do that individually themselves. So whilst they have developed some of these things, and whilst they've acquired companies that have developed some of these things, it doesn't matter if you can't read what all these individual things are. The fact is that they're interoperating and they're very complex. My key point here is that even this layer of complexity sits in a much, much wider world. They have to work with music companies, they have to work with Netflix, they have to work with film companies in order to make all of this stuff work in a way that consumers want them to work. So the point of the paper was we talk about, in Falmouth, we talk about open innovation a lot. It's kind of the umbrella that talks about the R&I strategy. But open innovation from the discipline that I come from comes from a book written by this guy in 2001, I think. And it's essentially a paradigm that says, we don't employ the brightest people, or we don't employ all of the brightest people, at least. Lots of bright people are employed by other companies with whom we can work in the future. And that's embedded into the 2030 strategy, where it talks about open innovation being interdisciplinary. So within our institution, us working together to find solutions to grand challenges, but also it's about working with many other organizations as well, and that's the kind of the main point. Often when you're trying to kind of pin down what something is, it's often worth looking at what it isn't. And James Dyson, whilst a genius and whilst running an extremely successful business, I'm not criticizing him, but he is the antithesis of open innovation. Dyson is the antithesis of open innovation. So if you go and work for Dyson, and I know the person who designed this, and I know someone who designed a little thing that I can't understand what it does in this thing, but critically I also know the person who runs their data products team, if you think that Dyson would want a data products team. So they are working on an infrastructure that collects data about people's use in order that they can provide utility for those customers. But the key point is, everything that they do is done within their very secure unit in Malmesbury. Everyone that they work with is under very strict non-disclosure contracts. So it's very opposite to their culture to be able to involve others. These guys, on the other hand, went through an existential crisis a number of years ago and actually learned very much from what their customers were doing, because their customers were saying, we want to run Lego in a different way. We want Mindstorms to work. We don't want you to design Mindstorms for us. We want to design these robots ourselves, and we want to take some bits from here and some bits from here, and we want to put them together to create our own. And then we want to put YouTube videos up of what they look like, and then we might want to be able to sell those. And Lego very smartly took this on as an overall process. So this is their open innovation plan, their open innovation program. And if you have an idea for a Lego set, the SpaceX Lego model of the rockets has just reached 10,000 votes in the last few days. So if you have an idea for a Lego set, you can put it onto this website. You then spend some time promoting it amongst their community of customers, and if you get to 10,000 votes, it will go into review, and their product board will consider putting that into their product portfolio. The slight, criticism that I would have on this is, whilst they share the original idea, if you create a character that they then go on to share to produce and put into another product, they don't share the value of that with the producer, with the original idea generator. So I guess from an open innovation point of view, it's limited. This is an example of what I think is a relatively recent trend in open innovation. These rather nervous-looking people are waiting to hear the outcome of the Lvmh Innovation Award recently, just a few weeks ago. So Lvmh, Louis Vuitton as we know them, or the parent company of Louis Vuitton, have recently invested a huge amount of money in lots of companies who work in an incubator and who are building tech capabilities that Lvmh are helping them develop, but also working in partnership with them. So they own some of these firms, they own parts of others of these firms, but they certainly provide them with a test bed to be able to develop their ideas further. So some of them are directly fashion related, some of them are about identifying biomaterials that are sustainable and recyclable. Others are really not that much to do with fashion at all, but are related to the Lvmh, but Lvmh are interested in them. So one of the companies that was through to the final has developed a speaker system that only has a very narrow field of sound, so only the person standing directly in front of it can hear it. Why do Lvmh want that kind of thing? Well, they do because they can send personalized messages as you're in the store. So their interest is very much related to their personal use, but not their core competence, so they wouldn't develop it themselves, they would want others to develop it for them. I'm not sure if you know who this guy is. He runs a foundation, Peter Diamantis. He runs a X Prize Foundation, and the X Prize Foundation gives $1 million a year to an innovator. And this is a quote that he talks about. So how do we harvest ideas from the crowd? How do we get people to come up with the best ideas, and how do we get them to solve some of the grand challenges? If you're familiar with the industrial strategy, the government's post-Brexit strategy for how to develop industry in the UK, you'll know that they talk about 4 grand challenges. And for those who were here yesterday, our friend from Innovate UK was talking about the 3rd wave of investments, and these are the areas that they're looking at. So they're obviously looking at AI and the data economy, making sure that the UK is ahead of the world in terms of creating capabilities there. They're interested in clean growth, so how do we develop the UK economy developing from sustainable sources? So one of the things that I'm doing is talking to a couple of firms about using blockchain in order to be able to create energy markets, where Chris talked about it earlier, so I'm sure he's familiar with the concept, but no one's done it commercially yet, of if you have a PV on your roof, a photovoltaic panel on your roof, you're generating electricity. You're generating electricity now, but you're sending it to the grid, and someone in the middle is selling that energy elsewhere, and you get paid for it. Why wouldn't I sell my energy that I'm creating on my roof now to Paul? Why wouldn't I be able to use blockchain to be able to do that? So that's one of the projects that we're thinking of being able to use and harness blockchain technology to be able to have both social and economic value. The other 2 are future of mobility and aging society. So these are areas that fit very much within what Falmouth can do and has capabilities of, but the clear contention is that we can't solve it. No one institution or organisation can solve it, hence the Apple example earlier on. And the problem with scientists, with academics, is that we like to build stuff and we like to focus on solving individual problems. And this isn't my contention, this is taken from an article just in the last version, the last edition of Harvard Business Review, which came out last week or so. And what it says is that institutions tend, scientists, because we're problem solvers and academics are problem solvers, we want to be able to sort it out ourselves, where actually we're much better to collaborate with externals. But there are lots of problems with that. There are lots of problems, and this is the point of the paper that I submitted, was there are lots of problems with institutions, academic institutions, working with commercial organisations. So, and really, they are essentially the flip side of the same coin. Timescales are a problem. Commercially, organisations want to move very quickly. We have time constraints on us that cause us problems. Who owns the IP? It's an inherent problem with open innovation. If we create an idea, we want to be able to take advantage of that idea, potentially personally, but certainly institutionally. How do the commercial partners tally the investment they've made and the effort that they've put in with these kind of things? There's a lack of trust and misunderstanding. So the point of the paper is to highlight some of those issues in order to say, don't be put off by submissions for grand challenges, because in collaboration with others we can do an awful lot more than we can do individually. And when you hit the first hurdle of putting that stuff together, which undoubtedly you will, there are ways of working through it. And I've just drawn from a quotation from Max Liu, who's the VC of University of Surrey, who talks a lot about open innovation. And his view is the key is about transparency and constant communication. So that's informal, constant communication between the parties who are working on the project themselves, but also through formal channels and institutional channels. Thank you.
So I think, again, that was quite useful, just having a look at this. You know, we keep saying open innovation, bring the walls down, and then let's start to work together. And exactly what he was saying was that, you know, it's all really complex. If it was an easy solution to it, we would have done it already. Second is timescales and IP and everything around that are huge problems. There are ways of overcoming it, and there are systems to overcome it, but we have to do that. And also that we, all of us, want to solve problems individually. So it's a difficult one for us to try and solve them together. Okay, I'm going to say let's have a break now, as we normally get told to have a break now. So if we can have 10 minutes and be back at 20 to 12, if that's okay. Thank you. But hopefully you're getting a sense of, this idea of, and I think that point that was very good about if cross-disciplinarity or multidisciplinarity is important, it's not that easy. Open innovation is complex, otherwise we'd all be doing it already. But again, from a university, is that your aim? Is that what you want to do? Is that where you want to go? I'd like to just quickly look at just the model of the Technical University in Eindhoven, the industrial design that I helped set up. This was around 12 years ago, maybe even 15 years ago. And what was interesting about the Technical University in Eindhoven is that so far, up to the point that we built the Faculty of Industrial Design, it didn't do industrial design. So in the Netherlands, a technical university is a bit like Imperial, so it's very much, it's the place that gives degrees, because if you go and do art and design in the Netherlands, you only get a diploma, so you can't get a degree. So lots of people want to go to the technical universities because they get a degree. But also it's often the place where engineering and the science around design is explored, because it's a technical university, so it's always the technical side of it. I was working at the Design Academy Eindhoven, and there was a very interesting initiative in the Netherlands, and the Dutch government said, okay, any university or art academy or design academy has to find a partner, and it's got to be a partner you've never worked with before, and you've got to develop a new course with that partner. So lots of institutions founded at art schools or design schools or performance schools. What the Design Academy Eindhoven did, which was quite interesting, was to work with the Technical University in Eindhoven. And I was connected to it from the beginning, so I was developing this Faculty of Industrial Design. And what was really interesting was that Delft in the Netherlands is very strong as a technical university around industrial design. And Delft, in a way, you didn't want to do anything that was connected to Delft, because if you were trying and do a similar thing to Delft, you just wouldn't be as good as Delft. So the aim of the faculty was to develop intelligent products, systems and services. So that was the sole aim of industrial design. And the way that they explored this was very interesting, because Eindhoven is a very strange city in that 150 years ago it didn't exist, it was just a village. But then Philips decided to set up in Eindhoven. So Philips were there. They developed all the Philips factories and for lights, consumer products, health products, everything around that. And they also attracted other large companies and services there. So also OSE, the photocopying people, DAF trucks. So lots of, and actually 90% of design and technology goes through Eindhoven, so it's very much the kind of industrial heart of the Netherlands. So we started to talk and work with the Technical University, and we started to talk and work with Philips. And we said, well, what's the real problem that you have? What's the real challenge you have, Philips, for instance? And they said, right, we have a challenge that we've got our designers and we've got our engineers. And they don't talk together, they don't use the same computers, they don't go to the same theatre, they don't watch the same television. They're two breeds apart. And that creates huge problems, because on Monday we were talking about the NAT Lab, which is Philips University Without Students, where they do a lot of the research and development. And NAT Lab has all these brilliant professors from all over the world inventing things, But then the connection with the designers was awful because they didn't talk the same language. So they couldn't really describe the innovation and develop the innovation because the designers didn't understand it. So Philip said, the one thing we want, the one thing that's important to us is that we make a collision between design and engineers, and we make a hybrid of design engineering, and those graduates from that course really understand both sides, but also can work with both sides. And as we said on Monday, one of the difficulties for that is that, on the worst sense, the students are generalists. They don't get enough detail, they haven't got enough depth in the subject that they are. So that was our worry all the way through developing the degree programme. But actually, that wasn't the case. So we had the engineers saying you needed 4 days of maths, and then the designers saying you needed 4 days of drawing, and then we had to develop a new system to try and take everybody out of the norm that they were. So we developed a set of principles, and those principles really were trying to make sure that people didn't revert to their normal practice, because we had professors of embedded systems. If we were not careful, they would come along and give the same lecture that they gave, that they'd given for the last 25 years about embedded systems, and although that might be okay, the students might not respond to it in the best way. So the first thing we did was to ban all lectures. You couldn't give a lecture. And it's interesting because Imperial College did the same last year. They banned all lectures, said you can't give a lecture. I don't actually agree with that now, because I think in some cases a lecture's the best way of getting across to maybe 150 students a certain amount of information, and it's cheap and good, and as long as it's quite concise, it's a good way of doing it. But of course, when you were trying to break a model to create a new model, that's what you had to do. So we also said that all students had to work in teams for 4 years. So no individual work, because we didn't believe anybody works individually actually. Even if you were making an illustration for the New York Times that we spoke about on Tuesday, actually you need to work with an editor, you need to work with a designer, you need to work with somebody who's going to pay you. So we felt as if people always needed to work in teams, and you always do work in teams, whether you're teaching, whether you're developing things. Even a solo artist has to work with a gallery, has to work with somebody who's going to print books, etc. So the other thing is that faculty and senior designers, so our approach was that the faculty were the senior designers and the students were junior designers. So instead of it being a huge gap between the professor and the student, then students were actually junior designers working on projects all the time, and everybody else, all the faculty, were coming in specifically working on those projects as senior designers, nothing more, nothing less. And that was a big thing for the lecturers, for the professors, but also a big thing for the students. So we said, yeah, if you want to go skiing in the middle of a project, you'll have to apply to your senior designer, and if it's possible and you've got your work done, you can do. So we were treating people as junior employees, more within a design agency or an industrial agency. So we also said, and this was a big thing, that students had to work on an educational portfolio and reflect on their own development. So we didn't have any exams, but we also didn't have formal portfolios. What we said was, this is the educational portfolio, and we would like you to reflect on your own development, and lecturers, professors don't give the final stamp mark, we just react to your own development. So what's most important is your own development. And there's lots of reasons for that, because we wanted people to get out of their comfort zone and deal with all aspects of their competency development, not just if they were good coders, they always stayed within the team as a good coder. So this educational portfolio, which was in English, and most of the students were Dutch, I thought that we would always have problems with people saying, well, I'm having a really difficult time writing this very nuanced and difficult reflection in English, and never once in the whole 7 years I was there did any student complain about having to do it in English, which was quite amazing. Shows how good the Dutch are at adapting and working in English, and also how much they wanted to work in English. So the other principle was that from day one, students work on industrial challenges. So there's projects, and it's not that you need to pick up your skills for 2 years before you're allowed to be working with industry. Actually, in the first 7 weeks, as I said on Monday, a group were working with DAF trucks and came up with a really interesting project. So we gave them the knowledge they needed as they needed it, which is quite a scary thing to do. The other scary thing is that because I was from an art and design background, people were from an engineering background, and actually the students were very good engineers. They knew more than me after 1 week. So there was a really interesting time when the university said, oh, okay then, could you write down what your expertise is, Alan? Because obviously if a student wants to work with you on a project and asks you to come and work, we need to know what your expertise is. And I thought, I have no idea. I have no idea what's my expertise. So, you know, typically in art and design, if a student says, yeah, I'm really interested in model railways, and I'm producing something that has an influence from as a tutor, you become an expert in model railways and say, oh, well, that's interesting, and you use it from your own expertise or thoughts or whatever. And their line was, yeah, but what's your real expertise? Not just adapting to things or, you know, just responding to things. What's your real expertise? So that was quite an eye-opener to me. And also the industrial clients, so there was always a client on every project. That industrial client also assessed the project. And that's another big thing. So you can have the clients in and they give a view on it, but we don't let them assess. And we let those people assess the project. And that was also a big thing. I must say that often people from industry didn't do a good assessment because they were just too kind to the students. So Phillips would come in and say, oh yeah, they've all done really well. And we're like, can you just be a bit more critical, because they've not all done really well and we need you to be more critical. And also, another important thing, that all the projects have to be built with an interdisciplinary team. So no one person can build their own project. So you had to have a professor, an engineer, alongside an artist, alongside a designer. And that was important, that we didn't want somebody doing pet projects or something. It had to be built by an interdisciplinary set of people. So I realise now why I was in India the last time I was here. I was here for Designing Design Education in India. I was part of the 2013 conference. I forgot, believe it or not. And one of the things I did as part of that conference is, this was, what we realised quite quickly was that if we wanted students to reflect on their own learning, what would they be reflecting on? Because you don't just reflect generally, oh, this. So we developed a competency framework, and this competency framework is here. So you have different ones, so you have the 6 main competencies on the left, so ideas and concepts, integrating technology, user focus and perspective, social cultural awareness, market orientation, and forms and sensors. And then on the left, I can't read it because it's too yellow, but then you have some sub-competencies there, which help the students go deeper in the things that they're doing. And that was and in a way, the competency framework was something that was across the whole faculty, and was almost like we couldn't change it. Or if we did have to change it, we almost had to apply to Parliament, the Parliament of the university, because if that kept changing, then our education would keep changing. So that competency framework became a very important way to develop that. Our idea was that students would only work on projects, but we also had to develop a set of small courses that went over 2 days. So they worked on projects for 3 days, small assignments for 2 days, and those small assignments actually gave them the tools to be able to analyse complexity or work with the engineering concept. So our bigger idea of we'll do it all through projects didn't work, and quite quickly we had to make these small assignments, but they reflected on their own development in those small assignments in their educational portfolio. So I wanted to just give a little insight into that. Another interesting thing is this. This was from the Design Academy Eindhoven. So they, for their assignment days, developed a plan. And the plan, you'll see that all the departments are in the middle. But they also have ways of looking at work or developing projects, and those are lab, forum, atelier, studio, and I can't read the last one. Market. Thank you. Your eyesight is much better than mine. I can see
It
it.
seems like market.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it was market. And what they use those for, let's say, lenses for, is to say, when you're doing a project, then try and reflect, if it's studio or in a studio way, in a forum way, discussion way, in a lab way, or a market way, but try and mix that up a bit. So if you're going to do a, let's say, a business case, don't always do it in the typical market environment. Swap it over and do it in forum, or do it in a lab. If you're investigating a material, don't always do it in the lab or the studio, but do it in the marketplace. So they were very interesting lenses to see how to develop this idea of looking at things from different ways. So I just wanted to give a quick overview of that. And also you had a question here, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, my question basically was that what we are talking about is developing flexibility in our learning styles, flexibility in also assessing the students, and how do you balance that with a structured curriculum, because you have session-wise plans and you have things that are supposed to be imparted to the students in a certain time frame. So how do you balance that, and how do you deal with that flexibility and structure?
And I think my answer then, and still is, I don't know. But in a way, by dealing with projects and challenge-based things, we are finding more and more that the students, on a need-to-know basis, we try and give them the need to know as they need to know it. So in some ways, a formal education is, first and second year, give them all the skills they need and all of those things, and then let them loose on real projects. And we find more and more that if we have a constructed way to let them loose on the projects earlier, they have all that raw energy, and if we try and have disruptions or interventions of what they need to know when they need to know it, that helps, but it doesn't answer your point totally. Because, and so I guess what we saw was that the projects was the need to know, the challenge based, but we also needed a lot of these little assignments to give them the tools or the structure or the formality to be able to have the tools to be able to do. But we tried to do that alongside the way that we were doing it. So I think there's not one answer to it. I don't know whether anybody else has a thought on that.
Project-based, I think the project-based learning works best, where you are kind of having a dialogue with the students and imparting or maybe discussing the concepts rather than, as you said, giving a lecture.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something where you understand and kind of have a dialogue and also get them thinking about things.
Yeah,
Maybe that's
yeah.
the way.
So I think
It also evolves as you grow, isn't it?
sorry.
It will be evolving all the time.
Yeah, yeah. So I think it is asking, and I think it was also a comment earlier in the week, are we stretching our students too far? And are we stretching our academics too far? Because if we're expecting all of this flexibility and we expect them to be textile designers that can go out into the world and work, then obviously it's a balancing act. But I think back to Cynthia's point this morning with the action research and Tracy Pritchard the other day is we just have to try things out and see whether they're going to work. And our reflection's got to be, if we're doing the education the same as we did 25 years ago, it can't be right. So we just need to try different ways and see whether they work. But that's a bit of a glib answer, so sorry. Okay, so now I would like to, let me just go back to my notes. I'd like to, also as part of the conference that we had around enhancement, there was actually our study abroad person, our Erasmus and study abroad, Jenny Grandis, who's Swedish, wanted to talk in 10 minutes about the Lvmh model of interdisciplinarity. So I'm just going to play the short lecture that she gave, because I think that's quite interesting as another model of interdisciplinarity. So let me just find that. This lasts for about 14 minutes, so that'll take us pretty much to the end of the thing. But I think it's also an interesting model from a university in Rotterdam.
But it's good to speak to you all about a model that I witnessed in Rotterdam when I went to visit one of our Erasmus partners. And I thought it was really interesting, and as soon as I heard about this core academic training, I immediately thought of this. So Lvmh Academy in Rotterdam have come up with an interdisciplinary module that actually works across all courses in their university, which I think is quite unique. And first of all, why should we learn about this? I think most of all it's really important recruitment tool. So for example, tomorrow at the open day, I'm sure a lot of you will be working, and lots of students always ask me when they want to come in and apply for an exchange to Falmouth if they can take a module in a different department. And maybe have it in the back of your minds tomorrow that when you speak to students, are there any of those students who might be on the fence, thinking about a different university, who actually would have chosen Falmouth if that was an option available to them. So this is a model that we can put into practice. That's very similar to us as well. So the Lvmh University have courses that match nearly every single subject of ours. So we're going to talk about the context around the module, we're going to talk about the actual structure, the benefits and the challenges, also a couple of different EU modules that are used at other universities, because of course this is not the only way to do interdisciplinary modules. And I'm just going to ask a few discussion questions that you can bring forth to the discussion later today. So Lvmh is in central Rotterdam. Netherlands is the most popular destination for outgoing exchange students from Falmouth, so it's quite an attractive destination. They are the country who teaches the most in English out of any European country, except for us then, in the UK. It's very well known for the quality of education. And like I said, they match with lots of our areas, and they have everything from fashion design to graphic design, interior design, fine art, for example. So what they did is create different pathways in different broad themes that run across society. So what they discovered was that education traditionally today is almost irrelevant by the time the students graduate. So they needed to come up with a different module to create learners that would be able to adapt and develop rather than just sort of being done with university when they come out, and sort of, adapt themselves to the working life, what's needed today from employers. So the commercial practices are very much in tune with what we're trying to do with Falmouth now, and to do it for real. So every single project that they have in this practice, the commercial practice, is something to do with a real business. So they do market research, they always respond to a real need of a real company, and work really closely with businesses. The second one is social practices. So this is more for students who are really driven, perhaps for sustainable or ethical reasons. So they want to maybe try a career in that field. And lots of companies obviously need to think about these things now, both from a profit point of view and also just from a sort of corporate responsibility point of view. So it can actually create more profit to incorporate this into businesses. So it's quite attractive for students to be able to focus on sustainability and cultural diversity, for example, while they're at university. Autonomous practices are more to do with the traditional sort of fine art. So here students are driven by their own passions. They're not really constrained to the sort of policies or a brief of a company. They're more free to let go, and they can get motivated by feelings or expressions. So depending on which one of these pathways they choose, they will use that to sort of form their own graduation profile, so that then when they exit university, they will actually be a different, have a different profile to other students who took exactly the same course as they did. So it's a way to distinguish them and to find their own niche in the marketplace. So we actually have Jocelyn Affleck here today. Where are you, Jocelyn? Oh, there you are. Great. So she said this about studying at Lvmh. So she went there for an exchange from graphic design and Falmouth to Lvmh. Interestingly, and unlike Falmouth, I noticed my work would be marked more favorably if I strayed away from the brief and applied more subjectivity. Authorship was something I'd always associated with a fine artist. All of a sudden, this elicited a burning desire to be more than just a graphic designer. First of all, I don't think she means like more than just a graphic designer in a sort of discriminatory way against graphic designers, because of course fine artists and graphic designers are exactly the same, equal value. But if you want to talk to her later today, she can answer any questions about how it is to actually study this model in practice. So how it's built up is that you can see here the structure from year 1 to year 4. So in the Netherlands, most art universities are part of a University of Applied Sciences, and the education is usually 4 years. And they actually do these pathways from year 1 all the way through year 4. So you can see in year 1 the practice module, practice 1, and then you see practice 2, 3, 4. It's actually quite a big part of the whole degree. So it forms about 25% of the total credits in year 1 to 3, and then in the final year, in year 4, it's actually half of the credits they do that year. So I think that's quite interesting how it's allowing so much flexibility throughout the whole degree, but still coming out with really employable students. So in the first year, students get introduced to all 3 practices to see which one they like most and which one really speaks to them. In the second year, they choose 2 to focus more on, so they specialize somewhat. And then in year 3 and 4, they choose the one that they, associate the most with, identify the most with, and that becomes their graduation profile as they exit university. And also in the 4th year, they do a special research report. So the way you do the assessment can change as well throughout. But all of the different disciplines go to the same practice modules in the same projects, and it's also across years. So students can be working with students from all different years and all different subjects. So here's an example of a project. So as Jocelyn described here, in hacking, so that is one of the autonomous practices. We had to work in groups to produce an interactive animation. It was a 4-week course where we had 4 sets of homework and a final piece. In my group was a fashion student, an animation student, a fine art student, and me, graphic design. This experience went really well. And in this project, they actually had to hack Xbox Kinect to create art pieces. So it's a really nice way to, incorporate digital knowledge and really modern ways, and also art, and you can change it from semester to semester. So when you speak to students about to go to Lvmh, it's quite hard for them to see what they're actually going to be learning the next semester, because each semester they set new projects that really respond to the market and what employers want, for example. It's a very open and very modern environment. So students sit a lot in stations where they all work together instead of traditional classrooms. And some of the benefits are, for example, most foremost is a great recruitment tool. So Cora Sanchez, who is the head of international affairs, say that it's contributed to higher recruitment numbers. So in 2017 to 18, they actually had 355 first-year students in the area of design. And if you compare this to other art institutions in Holland, they only had about 141 on average. So a lot of those students who were interested in studying design actually choose Lvmh compared to another institution. They've also said that especially international students become attracted to this because they can see how they can work in international teams. It also sort of matches up with a lot of the education that they're used to from their home country. It's very good for employability because students learn from the start how to work in teams, and of course that's going to be imperative when they come into the workplace later, and how to collaborate and get those sort of soft skills that students sometimes lack. Yeah. We also need to mention some challenges. So at first it's of course a little bit tricky to actually start this because you need to change the way the organization works. So you need to think about revalidation or assessment, what content are we going to have on these interdisciplinary modules. So you need to obviously take stock and really evaluate what needs to be done in the organization. There will be a transition period where people, both staff and students, they reported of Lvmh were struggling a bit. The founder, Roger Thewen, or I don't know how to pronounce his name, but he said that confusion and confusion was a key piece to this, how they formed it, how they developed it, because it's imperative that education is going to be confusing, and we need to form students who can cope with that. So it will happen. Recruitment might go down in the first year, but then hopefully it will pick up later. So now with Lvmh, they notice that they do get more students, and they also get better results. They evaluate each semester, and they've said that they see a higher quality of the final pieces and the graduation work. It can also be a challenge to make sure that the assessments are done correctly, because if you have students from different areas, how are you going to ensure that all students participate equally and are actually assessed fairly? So there are a few issues to work with, but in the end it could be a really positive thing. And it's not that we have to, So it's not that we have to do it in this way, we can form our own way. And I thought it would also be good to mention another couple of modules that are done in other EU countries. So, for example, Vesterdals Academy in Norway, that's another one of our Erasmus partners. So they also have interdisciplinary, but it's confined to a certain period of time. So most credits are taken within the specialism, but they have a certain window in semester 5. So in semester 5, all credits are completely sort of elective, so they can either choose an elective from within the academy, or they can go and do an internship, or they can go and do an exchange. So here you have all the choice, but for a certain amount of time, a certain period. The university I'm from originally is Karlstad University in Sweden. So I customized my own degree as well. So I chose to take 90 credits, like half of the total credits for an undergraduate degree in media and communication studies. But then I made up the rest of the credits with English, journalism, and cultural communication, intercultural communication. So here, as long as you take 90 ECTS in your specialism, the rest of the credits can be chosen by students. And the way they've enabled this is to have 2 ways that you can apply for modules. So you either follow a certain path where all students go through the same journey for 3 years, or you can actually choose to apply to each module individually, so you can sort of dip in and out of programs and just take one module if you want. So it's a very flexible approach. And if we want to come up with our own solution to this, obviously we have lots of great academics like yourselves to discuss about this, and there are unlimited options. We can create our own module that fits perfectly for us. So I thought for the discussion later today, I'd leave you with some questions that you might want to consider, because you speak to your colleagues all the time when you go to international conferences. Have you come across any other interdisciplinary modules that you might like to share, so we can get more inspiration for how we could possibly do it here? And also, if you can identify any key themes that would work well for FAMED. So when Willem de Kooning does autonomous, commercial or social, do you see any of those practices working here, or should we choose some other themes for FAMED? And thirdly, what are the pros and cons for interdisciplinary learning, and what actions do we need to facilitate this as FAMED? So what steps do we need to take to actually be able to incorporate this into the curriculum in our undergraduate degrees today? So that's what you might want to discuss later today.
Being a good institute that suddenly did a very brave move. So when I went 3 years ago and saw their end degree, and it was just a masher. I just didn't understand what was going on at all, and it looked like it was failing. But they'd taken a very bold step to go for something, and like Jenny said, the final year or the final 2 years, half of the marks of this interdisciplinary projects, half of the things for the whole of the year are those. So, and actually what it's done in the 2 or 3 years is it's gone beyond that kind of confusion, and students now are applying directly to it because they like that model. They like the specificness, but they almost like this interdisciplinary way of working, and they've, you know, from a point of view of commercial, social, autonomous, then it seems to be working, and you know, students can react to it, or it connects with them enough for them to be able to do something with it. Okay, that's for today. Thank you very much indeed. We're almost at the end of the week. Unbelievable. We have an hour and a half tomorrow, I think, and starting at 9:30, that's right? Yes? 9:30? This morning the door wasn't open, and I thought I'd said something really wrong yesterday. And there was nobody here, and the doors were locked, and I thought, I'm just locked out now. I said something wrong, but luckily I didn't. So tomorrow we're going to talk about a couple of models of postgraduate study that I think are quite interesting as well. And then hopefully a little bit of a discussion at the end, so you're not just listening to me, where we can spend half an hour discussing things after I show you one or two things. Brilliant. Thank you very much again today. Thank you.
Create a set of teams around that particular discipline, that sector, and so I welcome any discussion with any school and any department that thinks that either their graduates would suit this program, who want to start their own business, who want to forge their own creativity and creative technology, but also if they feel that there is their sector can actually provide challenges for us to engage with. And that's it. Thanks very much.
Okay, so just to recap then, I think it's important that we have a look at our postgraduate approach. In some ways, the model, the blue model on the left is you just get people in, you teach them postgraduate, and then they leave. Industry masters are very interesting. I think this model of the Sandberg is very interesting. So this, 15 students together with a head, a very high level head, a coordinator, is 2 years long. The masters finish after the 2 years, and you look for industry sponsorship. So what was quite interesting about the GUS Industries sponsorship was that they created a documentary alongside the masters of what they were coming out with and what they were doing. So I think that's quite interesting. And then the Launchpad model, what's interesting about that, I think, is that instead of you staying in the university, you're actually going out, finding the real high growth sector, demands that you need to do, and then linking those students up from all different disciplines, many different disciplines, not just art and design performers, and then making groups of people that are going to make these high-level, very attractive companies. And the big thing is to take a 25% stake to make it sustainable. So I thought that was quite interesting to have a quick look at. Now, I've spoken for 5 days now, So I would like you to do a little bit of work now. So over the last 5 days, we've spoken about assessment practice, feedback practice, blended learning, embedded employability, open innovation, cross-disciplinarity, and doing it for real. So what I'd like you to do for the remainder of the time, which is 50 minutes, is to gather together in groups of 3 or 4, and I'd like you to develop some positive outputs and plans or thoughts or discussion points in that group of 3 or 4. And what's your response to some of these things? So, and then I'd like you to give the feedback in groups to these plans before the end of the day. If you're with people from your own campus somewhere else that you normally work with, try and, I don't know, maybe it's good to be together with those people, or it's good to split up, but I'd like to hear a little bit your voice of what you're trying to do. So if we say we have 50 minutes, I'll give you 30 minutes to think about this now, 30 minutes to have the discussion. You might want to pick 1 or 2 things that when you've seen this, because obviously over the last 5 days I've not said this is the solution, this is the solution. I've just said here are some discussion points, this is a discourse around this. I'd like you to think about what you or your course or your department's plan or output or development could be around this area. Okay? Does that sound
Is
good?
the exercise clear? Or you want him to explain it again? Yes? No? What? Yes, yes.
Okay, so
Clear? Okay.
gather together in groups of 3 or 4, look at these subjects, the ones that you most want to talk about or develop. Just say it can be a very detailed, like assessment practice, we do it this way, but we would like to do a little bit of research and development in this, and this is what we're going to do, this is the problem, this is the challenge, this is what we plan to do, and as a group come up with, and then for the last 20 minutes, in 30 minutes time, I'm going to ask you to present back to us what your plans are.